tension, based on real events. The Corcoran Night, Corcoran, Minnesota. This one was sent in by a subscriber. It happened to my mom, Linda Carver, and my brother-in-law, Ryan Hale, just outside Corcoran, Minnesota, in the middle of a deep freeze. They'd driven out to a farm co-op near Hanover late that afternoon. Clear sky, brittle sun, that glassy kind of cold where your breath turns to powder. The ride out was easy. The ride back was not. By the time they hit County Road 116, night had dropped like a lid and the wind came screaming across the fields. A white wall of snow hammered the windshield. The wipers couldn't keep up. The defroster wheezed. Drifts crawled over the asphalt like living things. They pulled onto the shoulder beside a windbreak of dark pines so Ryan could scrape the glass. Mom stayed belted in, hands under her thighs to keep them warm, watching the hazard lights tick. The dashboard clock read 12:04 a.m., then glitched to 12 o'clock, then back again. The radio, which had been on a country station, flipped itself to AM and hissed. Under the static, a woman's voice whispered one word, stretched thin by the storm, "Move!" Ryan opened his door and the blizzard punched inside. Needles of snow, a knife of air. He slammed it, stomped around to the front, and started scraping in frantic, angry arcs. Mom stared straight ahead, telling herself to breathe. That's when she saw it. From the corner of her eye, a female shape drifted through the passenger side like fog, slow and smooth, trailing the cold behind it. It wasn't a reflection. It crossed in front of the hazard flash and didn't strobe. It slid through the car to the driver's side window and paused, head cocked as if listening. Frost bloomed on the inside of the glass where it hovered, sketching 4 letters backward with a fingertip from the wrong side. DONT. Ryan yanked the door open so hard the car rocked, fell into the seat, and jammed the key. He didn't look at her. He didn't say a word. He just pulled out, tires slewing, as if the shoulder itself might swallow them. For 5 full minutes they drove in silence, cocooned in white. Then Mom said very calmly, "You saw her." Ryan kept his eyes on the sliver of road alive in the headlights and said, "Not a her." He swallowed. "Not a person." The little things started piling up. The seat belt across Mom's chest tightened an extra click all by itself, like an invisible hand braced her. The rearview mirror showed a third headrest shadow in the back seat where nothing sat. The passenger window fogged from the outside and a small handprint pressed into it from nowhere. 5 perfect ovals in the frost that faded and returned with each blink of the hazards. The radio blurted the same clipped blizzard warning over and over, but the voice was always the same woman. And between the words there was that thin, breathy whisper, "Keep going." Twice Ryan had to stop. Once for a drift that looked like a low white wall, once to check a banging under the car. And both times the dashboard clock froze on 12:03 and the hazard lights refused to turn on. Both times, something knocked 3 times on the driver's door from the storm side. Polite, urgent. When he put the car back in gear, the clock jumped forward and the lights worked like nothing was wrong. In the strobing beams they passed a mile marker 19. Then a second later, mile marker 19 again. The green sign rhymed with ice but showing a fresh dark streak as if a wet sleeve had brushed it. The road wanted to loop them. The GPS spun and said recalculating without a voice. Just before the Maple Hill turnoff, the snow thinned to a gray veil and the pines fell away. Mom risked one glance into the side mirror. The beam caught a woman-shaped smudge running in the road spray behind them, head down against the wind, hair plastered to a face she couldn't see. The mirror's auto-dimmer flickered black. When it brightened, the smudge was gone. In its place, hoof-shaped divots pocked the blown snow down the centerline for 50 yards, then simply stopped. They made it to town, slid into the lot at Dottie's Gas and Go, and sat there with the engine ticking and their breath coming back in shallow gulps. Ryan finally spoke. "When I was scraping," he said, "I heard your door open." Mom shook her head. "It didn't." He nodded. "I know, but I heard it, and I felt someone take my elbow, cold hand, like a warning." On the inside of Mom's door, just above the handle, a far too small thumbprint in melted frost shone and then vanished. In the morning, the county closed 116. Snow had eaten both lanes and a pickup sat roof deep in a drift where they'd pulled over. The deputy at the barricades said if they'd stopped again, they would have spent the night in place and hoped someone found them before the engine choked. At the coffee counter, an old farmer with raw red knuckles told Mom, "Bad nights, Corcoran has a white lady. She doesn't take folks. She turns them back." He slid her a packet of hand warmers with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You listened. Maybe it was a ghost. Maybe it was the storm wearing a face. All I know is this. On that stretch of road at that hour, every small thing tried to keep them moving. Backward clocks, frozen hazards, 3 measured knocks, frost writing from the wrong side of the glass. Mom still won't park on the shoulder after dark. And if the radio ever flips to AM by itself and a woman whispers, 'Move,' she doesn't argue. She drives." Next scary story. The Hoofed Man on Summer Range, Red Lodge, Montana, 2008. I was 16 in the summer of 2008, spending June the way I always did, up at my grandpa's place outside Red Lodge, Montana, where the foothills lean into the Absaroka Range. That week it was me, Grandpa Hank McAllister, and my Uncle Roy Dalton pushing a band of horses to the high pasture, 50 miles from the nearest town and well past the last bar of cell service. We camped in an old sheep wagon by a lodgepole windbreak, 7 big stock dogs tucked under the axle, 4 Great Pyrenees mixes, 2 Anatolians, and a hulking Tibetan Mastiff named Kodiak. For 3 nights, the only sounds were hobbled bells, crickets, and the soft slap of canvas. On the 4th night, the air turned strange, so still the lantern flame leaned toward the door and stayed there. Couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. The dogs did something they never do. They whined, no bark, no warning growl, just a low, miserable keening like they were trying not to be heard. The little Noah radio crackled from static into one breath-thin word. "Stay." Grandpa sat up fast. "Don't open that door," he said, voice flat as a shovel. Uncle Roy met his eyes. "It's happening again, isn't it?" Grandpa didn't answer. He reached up and unhooked the old braided stock whip over the door. First time I'd ever seen him touch it. Footsteps came around the wagon. Neither hoofbeats nor boots, heavy and wrong, as if something big took too few steps for the distance it covered. The dogs slid closer under the axle until Kodiak's ribs knocked against my heel. The wagon's mooncast shadow bent the wrong way for a breath, like the light forgot its job. Something dragged along the boards outside with a rusty whisper. The latch lifted by itself. The door pushed inward 3 inches and stopped, as if a palm held it there. He stepped in. An old man, tall and narrow, hair paper white and comb too neat for midnight on a mountain. No frost on him, no breath in the cold. He smelled like wet iron and pond mud. He never blinked. He didn't glance at me or Roy, only at Grandpa, like the rest of us were smoke. Roy thumbed the shotgun's safety. The old man didn't flinch. Grandpa didn't raise the gun anyway. He snapped the whip once. Crack, and the sound seemed to slap the air flat. The lantern guttered, then burned taller. The old man's shadow lagged half a second behind his body, like a bad TV feed. He smiled without his cheeks moving. His eyes were the worst, each iris carrying a second little pupil riding the edge like a bubble in a level. "Get off my land," Grandpa said. "You're not welcome, and you never were." The old man tilted his head, listening for a far-off bell, took one step, and the wagon floor creaked in 2 places, out of time with his feet. When his coat hem swung, his bare feet didn't. The dusty plank showed 2 clean crescent prints, sharp at the tips, like a backward horse track the size of a man's hand. Roy lifted the barrel. The old man looked past it like it was a toy, then set his palm flat on the jamb. The paint powdered and rained down. Outside, the dogs gave up and howled, a thin high sound that made the horses stop chewing all at once. Somewhere in the dark, a bell chimed once where there wasn't a bell. "Out," Grandpa said low, "or I make you go." The old man's mouth widened a notch, skin not quite keeping up, and, just like a mirage, he thinned. He didn't turn or step. He paled to the color of breath on glass and slipped back through the crack, as if the night were water. The latch fell. The lantern steadied. The radio clicked off. We sat in our coats and listened while something tapped the doorframe 3 times, measured and polite. At 3:03, the wagon clock stalled, then twitched forward. When I dozed, I dreamed a child's marble rolled under the bunk. When I woke, a cold glass marble lay in the dust by my heel, cloudy and old. At first light, the world looked rearranged just enough to notice. The salt block by the corral had been cut down 1 perfect notch with no knife marks. The halters on the rail were braided into impossible knots none of us could duplicate. A ring of backward hoofprints circled the wagon. No approach, no departure, ending dead at the threshold. In the wash of the first sun, they steamed and faded like breath on a mirror. Grandpa took the whip down again and laid it across the door top. I asked what we'd seen. Grandpa told a story I'd never heard. 20 years earlier, riding late to Roscoe, he'd seen the same old man at a fence line and a child wrapped in a blanket at his feet. The hoofed man, Grandpa said. Old Carbon County names go back before the road, the stall man, rawhead, sometimes just the 2-step. He takes what isn't watched close. Grandpa knew it was wrong when the man's shadow leaned toward the moon. He'd swung the whip until the thing shivered and slunk off, leaving the kid choking on dirt. The baby had gone missing from a crib in Joliet after a window was left cracked in the heat. Grandpa brought him home and never spoke of it again. We broke camp that afternoon anyway, spooked faster than we wanted to admit. Back down on US 212, the Beartooth Highway glittered like a blade and everything felt ordinary again, like we'd imagined it. Except my boot carried a smear of fine brown powder along the welt that didn't match any dirt we'd crossed. And when I brushed it off, it smelled like wet pennies. I don't go back to that ridge at night. If dogs whine instead of bark, I keep moving. If a radio flips to AM on its own, I turn it off and hang iron over the door. And if something tall and polite taps 3 times after midnight on the high range above Red Lodge, I don't open the door, because some visitors don't come to talk. They come to count. Next scary story. My Uncle Daniel, Dan Mercer, bought a brand new sedan off the lot in Rockford, Illinois, the kind of purchase that makes you feel like your luck finally turned. For the first few months he babied it. No drive-thrus, no gravel roads, floor mats still wrapped in plastic. Then the little things started. Driving alone at night on East State Street, the dash chimed and flashed rear seatbelt unbuckled. He glanced in the rear view and saw the fabric pressed down, as if something small sat right behind him and shifted its weight. When he turned, the seat was empty, the indentation lingering before it slowly released. He told himself it was a sensor glitch, but more glitches stacked up. The dome light would bloom on by itself at 3:03 a.m. In his garage, the radio flipped to AM 1230 and hissed a faint counting. 1 to 13, back to 1. No voices, just breath between numbers. On cold mornings, the rear glass showed a single oily handprint the size of a toddler's, for fingers and a thumb splayed too far apart. And there was the smell. Wet pennies, old hay, and something faintly sweet like cough syrup gone bad. The first time he really saw it was at a red light by Haskell Park. His mirror caught a shape no taller than 2 feet, sitting centered on the rear bench. Pitch black skin, bead-bright dead eyes, and a tight goat's beard as neat as a line of ink. It wore no hat, no clothes he could name, just a darkness the car light couldn't land on. His gaze met his in the mirror, flat, patient. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. The light changed. He drove the rest of the way staring at the road and trying not to breathe too loud. After that, it rode with him. Sometimes it pressed its face against the headrest so close he heard the fabric rasp. Sometimes the back door alarm blinked, ajar, and the child lock clicked on by itself. Once, the lane camera recorded a rear occupant and printed a photo with a blank space where the face should be, a smear like a thumb over a lens. It never spoke in words he could catch, just a whisper that brushed his ear from the back seat vent, a phrase he learned to hate. Another life softer, not a command. Promise stated like a fact. Dan traded the car, sold it fast, paperwork barely dry, and figured he'd left the problem on the lot. For a week, his apartment on 7th Street felt normal again. Then his sound machine clicked to AM static at 3:03 a.m. The bathroom nightlight dimmed and brightened like breathing, and the carbon monoxide detector chirped once and died. He woke to wait at the foot of his bed, No footfalls, just the mattress settling a half-inch, and the soft tap, tap, tap of a fingernail on the wooden bed frame from inside the sheets. He snapped on the lamp. The weight vanished. On the floor, a trail of sooty, split prints, little crescents, led to the closet and stopped at the door. He asked for help. Father Miguel at St. Bridget blessed the apartment. A therapist at Swedish American told him about sleep paralysis. A paranormal group from Belvedere set up recorders and got 13 seconds of breathing layered under the hum of the fridge, then a tiny voice between the noise whispering, better, like a sigh. Friends who stayed the night swore they saw a short, black silhouette seated on the kitchen counter, legs dangling, head cocked, beard pointed like a pen nib. When they turned on the light, it was gone, but the counter dust held 2 handprints, 5 points each, spaced wrong, as if the fingers had extra joints. The thing liked windows. Dan would catch it in reflections, the sliding glass door at dusk, the microwave when it went dark. Behind him, perched on the back of a dining chair, looking through him as if he were the glass and something interesting sat beyond. It peered from the stairwell corner when he took out the trash, putting just its face into view, then flattening into the shadow when he looked straight at it. Neighbors mentioned a small man in his spare bedroom window at odd hours. Motion alerts on his phone labeled person detected at knee height. He stopped sleeping much. In 2014, we lost my uncle. The cause was ordinary on paper, and I won't drag that part into this. What I will say is that the week after the funeral, my aunt found Dan's sold car listed online by a private seller out in McChesney Park. The photos looked normal until you zoomed the rear seat. A faint round depression dead center, the fabric darker there, and a smudge on the headliner like a chin had rested, beard points scratching the cloth. I'm not asking anyone to believe this. I'm writing it down because when people talk about hauntings, they think of footsteps and doors. This wasn't a door thing. It was a passenger thing. It didn't smash, it rode. It learned his routes, loved 303, counted to 13, and pressed just hard enough to show it could. If you ever drive alone past midnight and your dash insists there's someone unbuckled in the back, don't check the mirror more than once. Keep your eyes on the road. And if a voice from the vent promises you that another life will be softer, remember that a promise can also be a hook. Some rides you don't want to take, no matter how tired you are. Thanks for watching until the next scary stories.